Good morning. My name is Christina Hall-Ackley. I am one of the co-founders of Ginger's Revenge, and this is my husband and business partner, David Ackley. We founded Ginger's Revenge in 2015 because we saw that there was a large segment that wasn't being served by the craft beverage industry. So our alcoholic ginger beer is a bold and exciting flavor. It's a completely different flavor profile than traditional grain-based beer. It's also naturally gluten-free, so it caters to people who either can't drink beer or don't want to drink beer. It's also crafted with quality. We use a lot of fresh ginger in each batch. About 95% of our ingredients are organic, and unlike a lot of the other alcoholic ginger beers on the market, it's not overly sweet, so it's very dry. And there's also limited competition in the space. Our business model is manufacturing with a bar, so I'm going to start by talking about the bar. While our tasting room isn't the only avenue for customer acquisition, it's definitely the front lines. This is where people get exposed to our product, where we build brand recognition, where we get feedback and get an idea about which flavors and beers would work well for future bottle releases. We have really high profit margins in the tasting room, about 90%. We opened in March of 2017, so the tasting room's also been really critical in cash flow for our first year of operations. But it has limited scalability. So where we do have the opportunity for scale is on the production and distribution side. Our profit margins here are a little bit lower, about 70%. But in our current space, we have a 7,800 square foot production facility about 2 miles from here. We made, in about 10 months in 2017, we made 200 barrels of beer. With our current equipment, so without having to buy any additional tanks, we can make up to 1,000 barrels of beer a year. And in our current space, by investing in additional tanks, we can make up to 10,000 barrels of beer a year. So we're definitely positioned to scale. So as you can see, one of the opportunities that we have to scale is through bottles. One of the things that we found really important was investing in strong branding. And investing in something that people would recognize when they came when they saw it on the shelves. So the picture on the left is actually a picture of a mural that we have in our tasting room. So this is one of the first things that people see when they walk in the door. People often take photos in front of it and then post it on their social media networks. So we're already starting to build that brand recognition. So when we build up to the point of being in retailers like hopefully Ingles and Whole Foods, people already start to have a familiarity with our brand.
And we've also been successful so far in securing some local press from Mountain Express and several other news outlets. We've got a series of charts here to illustrate how the business is going so far. This chart shows the volume of beer that we're selling per month. The blue is what we're selling in the tasting room. The red is our wholesale business. As you can see, they're both going in the right direction. And these are the revenues by month. Again, the beer that we sell out of the tasting room has kind of provided the foundation for our first year of operations. As we go into future years, the wholesale is going to be a bigger and bigger factor. The tasting room will be a smaller one. So we've been spending a lot of time this year focusing on growing our wholesale business. That's the opportunity to scale. So the chart on the left shows the number of wholesale accounts that have placed orders each month. The chart on the right is the reorder rate. So about 70% of our customers have reordered product, some of them for months and months on end. About 20% of them are new accounts, so it's hard to say whether they're going to reorder yet, but so far that rate's been pretty good. This is a chart that we developed a couple of years ago when we were starting up to estimate how much beer volume we could move, both in our home market and major metro areas, kind of within about 500 miles. One thing we really underestimated was how much a single account could move. But even so, we've got several high population areas nearby that we want to start hitting this year. It's not so much about following the timeline on the left, but we want to start planting our flag in some of these metro areas so that we can develop a presence over the next few years. In order to make this happen, one of the things we need is sales staff.
So one of the things that we need to do is invest in our team. So we have some of the key hires that we want to do: tasting room manager, sales manager, a production manager. And so what we're seeking is $100,000. We've raised $900,000 so far between debt and equity, and so that we can continue to invest in that branding, we can invest in additional tanks, and we can invest in some of the staff that we need.
All right. Very good, thank you. Coincidentally enough, I was at Hillman Beer a couple weeks ago and tried a Ginger's Revenge as part of my flight. Enjoyed it
awesome.
Immensely, so
Nice.
thank you.
Thanks.
One of the questions, I come from the marketing world, so I just am curious, when you're focusing on selling your beer and your branding, who do you really see as being your particular customer? Because I have to assume somebody buying a ginger beer is quite a bit different customer than some of the other options available out there.
Yeah, we've actually found we have a pretty diverse clientele, but a lot of it is people who either don't like beer. Sometimes they come into our tasting room and it's like almost like making a confession that they don't like beer in Asheville. A lot of folks are gluten intolerant. A lot of people just kind of want a different, lighter flavor. So we're definitely kind of more of a premium product. So people that appreciate that it has a lot of fresh ingredients, that it has organic ingredients.
Is your pricing reflect when you say a premium
Yes,
product? You're
yeah.
a little more expensive, are you then? I see. How do you communicate that? Because I was trying to think that when I was in Hillman Beer, for the example of, I chose it because I happen to like ginger, but how do you get that share of mind of all those individuals sitting at a bar and looking at that vast array of choices up there?
I think it sticks out to people because it's different. I think oftentimes, like at Hillman Beer, for example, a lot of the folks that are ordering that are maybe people who are gluten intolerant. And so that's usually kind of a starting ground, and then they might, share it with one of their companions, and their companion's like, oh, that's really great. And then in terms of our branding, we were really particular about the bottle that we chose, the paper that we used, the dye line that we used, so that we're kind of communicating a premium product without kind of shouting that.
Yeah, I just might, before I pass the microphone down the line here, from my standpoint, being a marketing person, I might want to hear a little more about those specifics up front when you talk about, you touched on the branding, you showed your brand, but I didn't understand then, how that communicated to your audience. So, just
One thing I would add to that is that our product does trend female more so than most of the typical beers. So,
well, I wondered that with the woman on your label, if that was intentional or if that's driving it female.
It was intentional, but also kind of serendipitous, just with developing the brand, putting ideas together.
So I was wondering, this is awesome, but I when you say that you noticed a market issue up front, or that there was a segment that was unserved by this, what data did you gather for that, and sort of how are you continuing to gather data beyond a geographic locale to realize this is a national trend?
Well, to back up a little bit, we started this business kind of as home brewers. We started making ginger beer at home when we were living in Panama, actually. And a few months later, we moved to Asheville and served the ginger beer at a homebrew beer festival, and we got the People's Choice Award. So we had a lot of direct customer feedback saying, hey, where can I buy this? I'd like to buy a keg.
I drink this all day, every day.
So we had a lot of that direct feedback early on. We probably did 3 or 4 festivals, and so we could see what was happening. We could see what was happening in the industry and recognize the opportunity.
And when we did market research, so before Prohibition, there were about 500 companies making alcoholic ginger beer. With Prohibition, that kind of got turned into a soft drink. Right now, there's only about maybe 10 that are making it crafted. There's some more alcoholic sodas on the market, but made by some of the macro brands. So it's really kind of a field with limited competition right now.
Gotcha. And then when you mention sort of Whole Foods and wholesale, and I see that's part of the strategy to scale, how have you won those wholesale contracts right now? And how do you plan to scale it? And then also, can you piggyback on other alcoholic beverage territory managers or whatever else instead of having to bring one in-house?
Yeah, so So the distribution has always been part of the game plan to focus on the bottles. Initially, our first several wholesale accounts were people just coming through the tasting room, bar and restaurant owners saying, hey, I want to put this on tap. So that's kind of how it got started. And we've been very deliberate about not doing too much too soon. Like, we didn't go and talk to Whole Foods right away. We want to make sure that we have all of our systems and our staff in place to do that. Distribution is kind of a big conversation point around craft beer. In North Carolina, we can self-distribute our own product up to 25,000 barrels. And since a distributor is going to take about 30%, we'd rather pay our own staff and have our own trucks to move our own product in the state. In order to get to different states, we'll have to sign up with a distributor. It'll help us scale. It'll eat at the profit margin a little bit. But those distributors do have a lot of connections at grocery stores and accounts. It can also be really difficult to get out of a distribution contract just based on North Carolina laws, so we don't want to get into one of those too soon. We just want to be really deliberate before we sign up with someone to distribute in the state. But it might make sense for us to get out to the coast, so we're not driving 8 hours.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah. And one other quick feedback. Everything was great. One thing that it's a pet peeve is whenever you show sort of graphs, I was like units, because then I'm going to sit there and I'm going to be doing calculations in my head of what unit it may be and what that number means, and then if I scale it out, what is that? And so it's like, just make sure that we have that on there, because otherwise you lose my attention for a second, and from the investors, like as soon as you lost the attention, then I'm already still on that slide as you move forward, and yeah, it's awesome.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Ginger's Revenge. I've had the opportunity to talk to these guys and learn a little bit about the business. So, but this was great, because every time you've got an opportunity to listen to both of you guys talk about the business, I think it's worth all of us sitting here listening to you guys. Congratulations on your success. So a few things. I've got a bunch of things actually. Through the process of taking a look at this space, I got some feedback from some folks that are acquiring brands like you, and the big three things that they shared was what they look for in this order is story, brand, and product in the bottle. So looking at that relative to the presentation, you guys did a lot of really great things. You really talked about your traction and nailed your traction, which is a very difficult thing to do well, and I think you guys did that very, very well. The brand comes through very strongly in your deck, but the story was kind of missing. You talked about it at the end there, and you guys have a great story of, just kind of falling into this, and then the market really almost pulling you into where you're at right now. So what I always like to do, and what I always look for, is kind of a story narrative, almost like hey, we started here, our goal is to go to there, and we've got this kind of rough route planned out. It could be like you search for directions, and it says, well, you could take these 4 routes. So we've got these 4 routes in mind. It might change, but roughly, if you look at what the trend line is, or what you look at the norm, it's going in this direction. And here's where we are today. Here's some of those milestones that we have out in front of us, and you can tie those to some of the specific initiatives that you're working on right now. So that's a big one. The story, I think you've got a great story to tell, so leverage that. I think as founders, I don't know if I've shared this with you, but I think I'd be interested in anything that you guys are doing, ginger beer or otherwise, because I've had the opportunity to spend more time with them, and I really love you guys and have a lot of confidence in what you guys can do.
Well, thanks so much.
Which is huge. That's more than 50%. If you don't believe in the founders and their ability to execute, then it doesn't matter what the product of the company is all about. Some other things, just real quickly on the demand side of things, I want to understand more about the market. You're a niche product in a niche market, albeit in a very large market, but you're very niche within a niche. So helping anyone that you're talking to, particularly investors, understand how big is big. And looking at the hard soda vertical, it's really dominated by like the root beer folks. So how do you make the argument that ginger beer will be the next cider. Yeah, and that's something that is going to have to be understood. The demand. So really focusing on the demand. Why is the market? What kind of signals is the market giving to you that suggests that there's real upside there? The differentiators. So you guys are a premium brand. You've got great market feedback. I want to understand more why you guys can compete and win against other ginger products that are either out there in the market today or that are going to come into the market. So those are the big. I've got more. I'll share them with you, but those are the big ones. Great job, guys.
Well, thank you.